Starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome everyone. It's wonderful to have you all here today for our first National Road Safety Partnership Program webinar for 2017, Busy Brain Syndrome. This webinar is proudly brought to you by the NRSPP in partnership with the Australian Road Research Board and People Data. My name is Melissa Dias and I will be your co-moderator for this session. I'm here to provide tech support if required and field any questions. Please feel free to contact me if you have any webinar related inquiries during or after the webinar. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague Jerome Carslake, who manages the NRSPP and its many activities. Jerome, for anyone joining us for the first time, can you tell us a little more about the NRSPP and its purpose?
Certainly, it'd be my pleasure. The NRSPP has been established to provide a collaborative network for Australian businesses and organisations to help them create a positive road safety culture, both internally and externally. It aims to help organisations of all sizes, across all sectors, to share and build road safety initiatives specific to their own workplace and beyond. It is delivered by ARB and funded primarily by Government Coalition and ARB. So for more information and more tools like this webinar, please refer to the NRSP website, and I really look forward to hearing from Lucia very soon.
Fantastic, thanks Jerome. So before we get started, we'll go through some general housekeeping. Today's webinar will go for approximately 60 minutes with additional question time. We have quite a large audience today, so we will try and get through all the questions we can in the question time, but if not, our presenter Lucia will be able to contact you after. We will be recording the session today and we'll share the recording conclusion of the webinar. So if you need to leave before the end, please refer to the recording. Webinars work best when they are interactive, so please don't be shy and feel free to ask any questions or share your experiences along the way. You can type your questions into the question box in your side panel at any stage of the presentation. If you experience any technical glitches, please use the raise your hand function and we'll be able to assist you. It's now my absolute pleasure to welcome Dr. Lucia Kelleher to the studio today. Lucia is the founder and director of People Data. She is a behavioural neuroscientist, business researcher and organisation behaviour specialist. Welcome Lucia, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Would you like to tell us a bit more about yourself and People Data?
Certainly, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess that in terms of busy brain syndrome, it was a bit of a journey getting to where I got to the point of actually discovering busy brain syndrome some almost 2 decades ago now, and it came out of my PhD, which was actually looking at cannabis and psychosis, which is quite different to where I'm focused now. But what actually came out of that was the fact that the relationship that I found with the cannabis and psychosis, I actually discovered a new theory of addiction from that, and I was able to extrapolate that to basically attention in our everyday lives. So that's where it's all come from, and so predominantly what I do now is work in the space of helping businesses, in particular transport companies, with keeping people focused and being able to pay attention.
Great, thanks Lucia. So I reckon we get right into it, and I'm going to hand you over to Jerome and we'll learn a bit more about busy brain syndrome.
Looking forward to it. Fire away, Lucia.
Okay. So, as I said, busy brain syndrome, it's a phenomena that's basically occurred as a result of our overloaded world. So, if we think back to the days pre-technology, life was a lot different and life was a lot slower. So, some of us who are older, we can remember that, and some of the young people probably don't remember because we've kind of had this technology with us for approximately 2 decades now. So, essentially, busy brain syndrome is a breakdown in the brain's capacity to process information. So essentially what's happened is that the change to our lifestyles due to technology has happened really fast. So if we think about evolution from the perspective of how long it takes for us to actually acclimatise or adapt or evolve to changing circumstances, busy brain syndrome is effectively a maladaptation, if you like, to a rapid change in the way in which we live in our environment, pretty much due to technology. So as you can see from the images on the screen there, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago with a smartphone, that was only basically widely available from 2007. So back in the days of our analog world, the amount of stuff that was impinged upon our brain at any one time was minimal. So we had the telephone and the memos and those sorts of things. So things were slower, and in terms of the deluge of stimulus, if you like, that's impinged upon the brain, was much slower. So what is busy brain syndrome in the sense of what's happened as a result of this overabundance, if you like, of stimulus? So as I said, busy brain syndrome is an adaptation that the brain has undergone in response to this deluge of information. And I think that we need to remember that the first job of our brain is to keep us safe. So we seem to forget that, and the busier we get, the more we seem to forget that fundamentally, as a human, we are like any other species on the planet, in that we're an animal, and that the first thing that our brain needs to do is to make sure we're safe. So we've probably all heard of the fight or flight response, and I'm sure most people have. And basically the fight or flight response is the brain's mechanism with which to keep us safe. So an example of when that kicks in will be, for example, if you're walking through a dark street at night and you hear a sound, and you will react, and most of us will probably know what that feels like. Our heart will start racing, we'll be on high alert, and we'll experience anxiety. That's basically the fight or flight center kicking in, saying, pay attention, there's a potential threat. So what's happened with busy brain syndrome is that all of this stuff that is impinged upon our brain every day from the digital world is still treated as a threat. So that part of the brain, unlike other areas of the brain that can change and evolve, it doesn't change, and it hasn't changed since we're living in the trees. And some could argue that there's some out there that are not long out of the trees. Certainly I can attest to that. So essentially what's going on is that fight or flight response has got locked on. And so if you look at the image there of the cat and the mouse, so things such as email and social media and all those other things are treated by this part of the brain as a potential threat. It's not smart, it's not clever, it's not conscious. All it does is detect signals, if you like. So that's why things that are not perceived as a threat are potentially treated as a threat, which leads into all sorts of behavioural implications, which I will get to a bit later on. So the other thing we've got to be really mindful of with busy brain syndrome is that this stress response is physiological, and I get a lot of people getting confused around the fact that stress has become synonymous with the psychological consequences, if you like, of busy brain syndrome. So we all know about overload and harm, distraction and job stress and all of those things that basically are the way in which busy brain syndrome manifests. So that's like the psychological consequences which are downstream, if you like, of the of busy brain syndrome root cause, which is in the physiological stress response in the unconscious part of the brain. So if you see that top image, the guy jumping over the fence because he's been pursued by the bull, that's what the stress response does. So busy brain syndrome, effectively that thing's locked on, and that's not good, as we'll learn further on. So what does busy brain syndrome do? The most chronic and critical thing it does is it absolutely decimates our capacity to pay attention. So the thing is with the human brain, there's essentially three levels of the brain, and there's the conscious area, which is our rational brain, which is what we know about consciously. There's the middle area, which is the subconscious, which is where our emotions and other things reside, which we're not directly conscious of, but we are subconsciously aware that they're there. Then there's the unconscious, which is what's sometimes called the survival brain, or the reptile brain, or the animal brain, or some other not so nice terms. And this is completely unconscious, but that's kind of like the nerve center or the control center of the brain. It's where all the important stuff goes on. So, and the thing is, it's where our heart rate's monitored and our breathing and all those things that are critical to keeping us alive. And that's unconscious for a reason, because if we were actually having to pay attention to that stuff all the time, we wouldn't get anything done. But so it does it automatically for us. But as a consequence of busy brain syndrome, unbeknownst to us, and that's the insidious thing with our busy brain syndrome, is we don't know it's there. So it's, I would hazard a guess that 85 to 90% of the population, particularly in the Western world, are impacted by busy brain syndrome. And we just don't know it's there. And so what happens is when there's too much stimulus, as you can see from the image, the only way to get stuff into your brain is via your senses. That's categorically the only way you can get stuff in there. So that the brain's actually processing every bit of stimulus that actually is impinged upon it. Another thing that sits there, you can see sensory memory. Now this thing's really quite critical. And a really good example of how that works is with food addiction. So there's pretty good evidence now that obesity and other things are basically a condition where people are addicted to food. And I got first-hand experience of this a few years ago. I had a friend that was, she was struggled with her weight, but she was so fit. She was obsessive with exercise, and she'd turn up at work at 6 o'clock and go to the gym for an hour and run on the treadmill and ride bikes and do all sorts of things, but the weight just wouldn't move. And so I was just fascinated, and then one day she actually came clean to me and said, "I'm addicted to hot chips." I said, "How does that work?" She said, "Oh, I can be sitting at home on the couch at 10 o'clock at night and I can taste and smell the hot chips." I said, "Really?" And so what do you do? She said, "I know where I can get hot chips at any hour of the night. So I go out and get hot chips." I said, "Really? That's extraordinary." So the power of the sensory memory, as I allude to here, is extraordinary. So whilst we may not have a direct stimulus from our physical environment, that sensory memory is equally as powerful in locking up, if you like, our attention area. So as I said, with busy brain syndrome decimating attention area, once those attention resources are full, they're full. So that attention area of the brain has a finite capacity. So with distraction, for example, I did some work recently with train drivers who were running red lights. So that's it's called a SPAD, so it's a signal passed at danger, and trained all of these train drivers, and they were absolutely appalled that they would not see a red light. So this organisation had quite a number of 100 of these incidents, which was potentially catastrophic, each one of them. And so basically when I was training these train drivers, I explained to them that once the attention area is full, it's full. And it's not your eyes or your ears that process the red light in the case of the train drivers, it's your brain. And so when it's full, like I said, it's full. And so, we've all had experiences, I guess, when we've not remembered parts of our journey of our drive, when we're driving to and from work. And interestingly, I used to ask this question over 10 years ago when I first started training in this area. And maybe one or two people would put their hand up when I'd say, "Oh, how many of you forget parts of your trip?" Now, everybody. And not only everybody putting up their hand saying, "Yes, I do, that happens to me." For some people it happens daily. And the fact is that when, like I said, the attention area is full, so with driving, for example, if you're on an automatic, on a route that you travel consistently, autopilot, which we'll get into a little later as well. So like I said, that's why you don't see things and you don't process, hear things, and you think, how can I not see that? Well, when your brain's full, your attention area is full, you won't, which is very scary. So essentially what happens with the when this attention area is full, as you can see from that image on the left there, the brain loses extraordinary capacity with its bandwidth, if you like. So that's why when we're in the state of busy brain syndrome, there's not a lot of cognition available. So there's not a lot of creativity, not a lot of problem solving, not a lot of really good thinking, if you like, because of this overload causing so much of what we do every day, if you like, to become to be pushed into autopilot. So pretty much on average 60+% of everything that we're doing on a daily basis is on autopilot, which means it's below our conscious awareness, which is a bit scary again. And as you can see from the image with the guy delivering the parcel, it's fine. No, it's not. It's crushed. So this is a classic image, and I bring this up every time I present because I think it's really telling. Now, this is the Empire State Building. A lot of you have probably seen this image, and I just think it's great. But if you look at it, this was going on in the 1920s. So you can see from the writing at the top there, only 5 people died on this building, and this is the way these guys worked. So what was going on back then? How were they able to stay so safe? Well, they weren't subjected to busy brain syndrome, and back then, without the distractions that we have today, all they had to do on a daily basis was focus, and they were very comfortable doing it because humans that are involved in safety critical industry work, for example, they're very good at focusing and concentrating. So if we flick forward to today, this is the example of where things are at today. Interesting. And I'm not for 1 minute suggesting that any of these safety measures or so forth are an issue. They're very, very valuable. I'm just making the distinction between the past and today, and the fact that accidents are increasing today. We've got more accidents and incidents than we did have in the 1920s. And the reality is that a lot of this stuff actually causes distraction. So we've got to work towards, I guess, making sure that we keep a balance between rules, regulations, safety equipment, procedures and all those things, and the human. Because humans are really good at paying attention, and as I said, safety critical employees and truck drivers and so forth, they're really good at it because that's why they do those jobs, because they're good at it. But this stuff often gets in the way, so we've got to actually get that balance back again.
Excellent. So we've got a first question here through from Dennis. Thanks for this. It's more of a statement you might like to comment on. Attention-Leoma area is necessarily working to capacity. Rather, you're dividing and focusing your attention on something else. Autopilot is an issue of lack of mindfulness, and that's okay too with routine and mundane tasks that are second nature. This may not mean that our attentional capacity is overloaded. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and there's a lot of debate around attention and how it works. And so what what busy brain syndrome is referring to, and where this actually occurs, is it's actually a problem with information processing. And so in terms of that information processing pathway, the first thing is that there's a gateway, if you like, in terms of perception. So we're actually talking a little bit earlier on than attention. And so as a result of the fact that the information processing pathway gets blocked up, then it shifts into attention. And literally, when the attention, as I was explaining, when the attention area is full to capacity, it doesn't matter, you know, if you've got capacity to divide your attention or select your attention or what have you. When it's full, it's full. So that's the problem. The problem is that there's a finite capacity in that area of the brain to be actually able to deal with stuff. And that the problem is that when it's full, and it's not going to process. It's just not going to get, the signal's not going to get through.
Is there a difference between males and females? And the reason I ask, for all of the other males out there, you might have been told as you're sitting in front of the TV watching it, why couldn't you hear the kids? Why didn't you see what's going on? And you're purely focused on, I don't know, a wonderful TV show.
Yeah, it's interesting that you should say that, and it's a question I get asked all the time, particularly when I'm presenting. That men ordinarily ask the question, why is it that the women can do things and they're perceived to be able to multitask? Well, the reality is nobody can multitask. So, you know, if you're not giving 100% attention to a cognitive task, you're actually, if you're trying to do two things, that means you're giving 50% of attention at best to each. And but the thing is with females, and it comes back to the fact that women are mothers, and they've got a very heightened ability, if you like, to be able to multitask, if you like, in that autopilot area, because they can actually be paying attention to kids. And it's purely a thing that, as I said, that females have, and I believe it's an evolutionary thing for our survival, so that they can actually, they know they can actually be paying attention to what kids are doing, and men don't have that. But that's as far as it goes in terms of their ability to multitask.
Got a great question here from Adam. I like this one. Can you train your brain to have a bigger capacity for attention, like muscle building? And just to draw on that, Luke Sampson around the designing your brain.
Yep, that's good question. Now, when I actually train people in how to overcome busy brain syndrome, I actually refer to it as a like similar to the muscle. The muscles have memory, and it's not about retraining your brain from a neuroplastic perspective, and so with the brain gym and all those other things and being able to create new pathways and so forth in the higher area of the brain. It's different to that. It's actually about adapting your brain. So it's about adapting your behaviours, and it's a very similar process, but it requires a really robust, rigorous behaviour change regime, and with a lot of rigour around it, which I'll touch on briefly a little bit later. But yes, it's and the way that you actually do overcome busy brain syndrome is exactly by retraining it to be able to revert back to being able to process information, which is basic. I'll get to again in a minute. But yeah, it's possible.
And that multitasking comment you made, I guess that's one of the reasons why, for example, learning to drive a car is so difficult.
Yes, yes. In the early stages, it's incredibly difficult because you're having to cognitively apply attention, if you like, to every task. Once you actually get it, it slips back into autopilot.
Question here from David. Is there a difference among people in terms of their capacity to handle being busy? Does everyone have the same limits before attention becomes full?
That's a very good question. And certainly I had a question asked similar to this in a conference, the Psychology of Safety conference last year, by a psychologist who works with South Australian Police. And she said, tell me, do narcissists have busy brain syndrome? And I said, no, they don't. Which is why we see a lot of those sorts of behaviours in workplaces. So typically those sorts of people don't have busy brain syndrome, and also good leaders. So you come across a really, really good leader, they won't have busy brain syndrome. Sports people, elite athletes, and those top of their game in any area, no, they don't either. And what's peculiar to them? They actually have an ability, if you like, to be able to separate themselves from being in the busy state and the free state, which I'll get to again further on. So, yep.
Great. I've got a good question here from Karen. Have you worked with the car industry at any stage? I ask, as surely vehicles contribute to busy brain syndrome with new technologies incorporated, such as touchscreen, GPS, etc. And just to draw a little bit further on Karen, I mentioned before we came in here with Lucia, I met with someone this morning, and the comment he made was 9 mirrors is what a heavy vehicle has to have around them moving through Melbourne, plus you got all the other things to watch for as well.
Yeah, it's hugely problematic, and a lot of the transport companies that I've spoken with, particularly over the last 18 months, have realised that they call it, some of them call it the bling, and it's absolutely a good term. The bling inside the cabins is hugely distracting, and it is. And the thing is that driving is actually becoming increasingly difficult as more and more other road users, so I completely feel for transport drivers, because other road users are getting more distracted. And so if we go back to the image of the Empire State Building and the current stuff and rules and so forth around safety, it's exactly the same thing with driving. So the more we load up our vehicles with bling, the more likely people are to be distracted. So yeah. So it's a very real problem.
And Duncan makes a quick query. Females, are they better task switching?
Yeah, look, marginally, but again, I don't like getting into the male-female debate.
Fair enough.
But marginally, just purely because of the fact that they're more attuned to their emotions, so they can actually flick quicker. Because in terms of the pathway, it's sort of unconscious brain, middle brain, which is the emotional area, and then the conscious brain. Blokes, and look, I'm not in any way being disparaging towards you males, I love blokes. Yeah, it's just a little trickier for you. So.
No, we're different.
Yeah.
And another one here from Adam before we move on. So control stimuli rather than increase capacity?
So interesting. Look, I think that at the end of the day, there's a really sort of easy pathway to overcome busy brain syndrome, which actually needs, it's around acknowledging our humanness, which I'll get to at the end. So it's almost like when we actually can step back and realize that we have incredible capabilities as our human, in our humanness, which we've lost, which I'll get to in a minute about how we've lost that. So we've basically got to get it back.
One more, which I think you'll be drawing on in the tick. Busy brain syndrome, this is from Dennis, appears to be defined as those who have poor attentional capacity. And he also says you can certainly train your attention.
Yeah, you can, and it's not so much poor attention capacity. It's actually a poor ability to actually be able to step outside of yourself and to go into the observer mode. Someone mentioned mindfulness before, and you know, mindfulness is very popular, and it's been run in organisations and workplaces and exercise and all those sorts of things. All those sorts of things, which I'll get to in a minute, they actually cause you to step outside of yourself from the perspective of actually being able to be an observer, which, as I said, I'll get to a little further on. But yeah.
Well, I think we should probably move on. So that's fantastic. Thanks for all these questions pouring in. Look forward to the next pause.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now in terms of being addicted to distraction, we've probably all heard of the term FOMO, so fear of missing out, and also nomophobia, the fact that we are addicted to our phones. So nomophobia is a recognised phenomena. So I just wanted to sort of go into a bit of detail about what this addiction is. So essentially, as I said, from my PhD, I uncovered a new theory of addiction, which, and I won't go into the neuroscience, but essentially there's a system in the brain that mimics cannabis, and which is how I actually uncovered all of this. And that system was only discovered in the mid-90s, and so it's the endocannabinoid system, if you like, which is similar to the opiates. So we all know we have endorphins in our brain, which mimic the opiates. And the reality is, if we're going to get hooked on any drugs, then there needs to be some sort of mechanism in our own brain for us to actually enjoy the drug, which is why humans get addicted to opiates and people enjoy using cannabis, because there's got to be some sort of mechanism in our own brain that assists with that addiction, if you like. So what's these endocannabinoids for? And there's been an awful lot of research in the past, probably 5 years in particular, around what that system does, because when it was first discovered, it was like, we don't know what this is, unlike a whole lot of stuff inside the brain. But what happened, what this system does is it's actually basically controls, has a role in controlling attention. So basically, with the addiction that I uncovered from my PhD, was that there was this addiction with cannabis. Cannabis was never deemed to be a drug of addiction because it didn't have a physiological profile or an affective or emotional profile associated with the continued use. But so I actually uncovered that there was a very distinct wanting or a cognitive component to people being hooked on using cannabis. And for those people with schizophrenia, for example, 60 to 80% of them are addicted to cannabis. And basically what cannabis does in that population is it actually speeds up their processing to speed to normal, because people who go on to develop schizophrenia have got a deficit in their information processing. So I won't go into detail, but this is just to let you know how this all came about. It's a fascinating area. But so what's happened is with busy brain syndrome is that it's mimicked that same addiction. So we've actually got that same addiction going on, where our attentional bias, if you like, is towards checking, which is why people, like FOMO exists, fear of missing out, and the nomophobia. It's, and how many people sleep with their phone next to their bed and grab it as soon as they wake up to check, what email or what's message or Facebook or what have you. And everyone that most people I speak to say, but I use it as an alarm clock. Yeah, sure. So this bias, if you like, towards checking is the fundamental, if you like, fundamental basis of FOMO and nomophobia. And so it's not so much that the fear of missing out is the addiction. It's the addiction is, if you like, to the updates. We're addicted to just wanting to know what's going on, and as I said, this is mediated by a brain, and which is why people have extreme anxiety. Certain people have extreme anxiety. If you suggest, put your phone away for the weekend, oh dear, can't get that, can't do that, and they do experience anxiety. So it's as I said, there's a lot of brain chemistry going on that's actually driving that. So let's look at some of the effects of busy brain syndrome. And this is from the perspective of workplaces predominantly. We see that avoidance behaviours are on the increase, and I hear people in workplaces and managers in particular saying, oh, they just cherry pick the easy stuff. Oh, they just keep leaving these tasks, like, oh, they'll do what they want to do. And we're all guilty of that. We all have our in tray, and there's stuff there that just sits there because we avoid it. And the interesting thing is that avoidance behaviour is not intentional. We have absolute all intentions to do these things, but the brain has a different idea, and that's essentially because of the fact that the brain is an energy miser. And so basically, if you're probably all aware of people that have that awful disease, anorexia nervosa, or people that go on hunger strikes, for example. The last thing to ever break down when people get to the sort of pointy end of those conditions is the brain. So the brain will cannibalize the entire body for energy. And so if thinking about that, the brain will constantly be assessing its requirement for energy. And so busy brain syndrome means that it's sort of gone into overdrive, if you like, of actually pushing stuff, as I said, down into automatic behaviours. So, we have all the intentions in the world to do these things, and with distraction, that's another thing that actually gets pushed down into the unconscious. And that's all mediated by this, the effect, if you like, of busy brain syndrome, which I alluded to on the previous slide. And the other thing that's occurred is that behaviour change is really, really difficult. It's always been difficult, but now it's extremely difficult, as anyone will attest to who tries to lose weight or something like that. And New Year's Eve, New Year's resolutions, which most people don't even bother with anymore because, oh, what's the point? I can't stick with it. And that, again, is all mediated by these mechanisms that are underpinned by busy brain syndrome. And the other thing is that we are seeing increasingly instances of autoimmune diseases and those sorts of things in younger and younger people, and like in Asia, Southeast Asia, it's a phenomena where the most at-risk population to heart disease and strokes is the 30 to 40-year-olds, which is quite serious. So all those hormones, those stress hormones, are floating around in the bloodstream at all times, pretty much. So another effect is that the emotional contagion has been exacerbated as a result of busy brain syndrome. So you can see the sheep. So there's this herd behaviour, this sort of group behaviour, for the like, is on the increase, and it's quite phenomenal. There's a lot of research going on with social defaults and other groupthink behaviours because of the fact that it's, we realise that this is on the increase. The other thing is that there's we all have almost a zero tolerance to failures and errors, which we see over and over again, particularly in technology industries, where it's, the promise is that this thing will work, and if it doesn't, people go crazy. So spare a thought for people in call centres with technology companies. But that's another effect of busy brain syndrome. Trust and collaboration are eroded. We see increasingly poor behaviours in organisations, and the reason for that is that when we're in a state of busy brain syndrome, where the only emotions that are available to you are negative, and so our default is to think negatively and to think problem focused and to think, oh, something, what are they doing? And so it's when people actually get to realise that this is going on, their behaviours change markedly. And again, this is autopilot. People don't even realise it's going on. And I used to work a lot in the space of stress claims, and I kid you not, with every single case, once the person was with me and we were discussing it, And I'd say, oh, really? Do you think that if you're in the state you are in now, you would have reacted the same way? Oh, God, no. No, I wouldn't. No way. So, and that was, 10 years ago that I was doing most of that stuff. But so now it's exacerbated exponentially. And so in line with that negative availability of only negative emotions, the perceptions are distorted. So, that's why we have so much issue with ambiguity with communication. So I didn't mean that. Well, it came across like that. So, it's always open to interpretation. And when you're interpreting things from a negative perspective, it's not likely to be that good. So now if we get into the effects of busy brain syndrome while driving, one of the phenomenal things is that with texting and driving, a study I was involved in not long ago with young apprentices. The staggering thing was that these young kids, they actually completely believed that it was okay to text and drive. So what are you talking about? Of course I can text and drive, which was quite staggering. You cannot text and drive, period. And certainly other people I speak to, and I see it myself, when I drive now, I'm constantly aware, if you like, of cars that are slightly drifting. It's like, I'm almost like hyper-vigilant. And sure enough, if you get next to that car, phone, they'll be texting. So it's a major problem. And the biggest problem is that people think they can do it. No, they can't. In-vehicle technology, we alluded to this before. Again, anything, if you think about the fact that cognitively we can only focus on one thing at once. So if you put lots and lots of other things in there that people are expected to focus on, like Jerome's comment around the 9 mirrors, well, hello, Houston, you've got a problem. And road rage. It's interesting that I don't like driving anymore. I used to like it, but the instances of aggression and so forth, and you get honked at and so forth, look, they're just increasing. And the reality is that why is this increasing? People say, why is it increasing? Why are people so intolerant on the roads? And I think that one of the things that's driving road rage is that people are so pressured at work. And look, it's a phenomenon with people in this country. We actually don't like to sort of make mistakes or be seen to be not performing in any way. And look, busy brain syndrome means that we're under pressure most days, and most people are under pressure at work most days. And we don't like that. It doesn't feel good. So get in the car, you're on your own, and we pretty much let loose. And it's, as I said, it's a phenomenon that's on the increase. As pressure increases, we're unfortunately probably going to see more of this this road rage. Okay.
Cool, great. First thing we'll ask, Adam asked a question here. What does DHEA do?
It's a hormone that actually calms you down. So essentially, there's a very fine balance of hormones in the body which are regulated by neurotransmitters in the brain. And so when the stress response is locked on, so when busy brain syndrome locks on the stress response, as I said, the brain's very, very clever at being able to modify itself. So what's actually happened as a result of busy brain syndrome is that it's actually said, gee, all those other responses around, if the stress response is on, elevated heart rate and blood pressure and higher breathing rate and so forth, it said, oh, gee, if we keep that up, people are not going to last for long. So it's actually pushed that down, but it's in terms of the hormones that are underlying, so the cortisol released and those other those relaxation hormones being depleted. So cortisol is is the opposite, if you like, DHEA, and so that balance, which is when it's nicely balanced, it's at equilibrium. It's not at equilibrium. So basically, that's because of the fact that cortisol's in overabundant supply.
I hope that answers your question, Adam. I've got a good one here from Luke. Being busy obviously presents challenges for us being effective at tasks. What are your thoughts on how we seem to consider busyness as a status symbol? It seems to me you can't go a working day without someone telling you, how busy am I?
Oh, that's a great question, and that's what I was alluding to with the road rage, because I've actually been writing a book for a while, don't get me started, but one of the titles that we were thinking about with the book was Busy is Bullshit. So excuse the language out there, but that's basically what it is, because it is, and it's because of the fact that, as I said, we all want to achieve and we all want to be seen to be productive and recognised for our productivity and all that sort of stuff, and the more busy brain syndrome kicks in, the more insecure we get. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm busy, because, you know, what are you going to say? I'm not busy? So, you know, it's almost like we're on autopilot with that as well, and it's hugely problematic because we're not honest. No one's honest because we all know, and so we're all looking over the hedge going, oh gee, they seem to be in more control than me, and oh, how do they do it? But I'll just, you know, pretend that I'm doing okay. Oh yeah, I'm busy, and all the rest of it. So we've got this huge overlay, if you like, of lack of transparent and open behaviours that are a result of busy brain syndrome, which, you know, are very difficult to break down.
Got a question here from Dennis. What tools or criteria do you use to measure the busy brain syndrome? And the statement around our ability to focus and pay attention has reduced 3- to 4-fold in the last 10 years. How did you derive at that data?
Interesting questions. In terms of the capacity to measure it, interestingly, with the Fitbits and other wearable technology, there was a big interest a few years ago, and it seems to have waned now, where there was wearables that were actually able to detect your stress response, basically your heart rate variability. So there was one called Olive and another one called Tinky and a few other ones that were alluding to the fact that they could test effectively busy brain syndrome. And a lot of them have actually gone off the market, and there's a lot of work that came out of Stanford and MIT in the US, basically saying you can't measure this stuff without, in the absence of a very, very robust capacity to detect the signal. Detecting signals from the human body is really difficult. So a lot of these wearables that are saying, oh yes, we can test this and test that, and yeah, okay, because it's difficult to actually measure from the physical, from the body, those sorts of things. And so the other question, well, in terms of the attention, that's actually come about from the research that I've alluded to around endocannabinoids, so the avoidance behaviour. So again, there's a lot of stuff coming out of the US and some stuff coming out of the UK around the fact that, yeah, our capacity to actually deal with stuff and to be effective has eroded.
I think we might try looking into doing a quick fact to help you with that one, Dennis. Kelly's got a good question here. How do you fix the problems of youngies thinking they can text and drive?
Yeah, good question again. And I think that with respect to the youngs, these kids grew up with technology, so you know they don't know anything else. So it's almost like they seem to be able to get away with it. They've grown up with at school being able to listen to music and text and do all sorts of stuff while they do their homework, and even in class, like I've got a 19-year-old, and she's, you know, what she can do with the phone and so forth, and still effectively get reasonable grades. But the thing is, if they actually try to focus, if they get under pressure, they realise pretty quickly that they can't multitask. They can't actually do these things. So there's, in terms of the definitive answer, look, I don't know the definitive answer, but the fact is that there will be a point that they get to where they realise that, hey, I can't do this. So yeah, throw that out to the clever people to come up with something, but that they've got to get to the point where there's enough pressure. And unfortunately, a lot of them you know, have an accident. And then, you know, if something's happened to these kids, they get it and they never go back to those behaviours. So, yeah, it's a problem.
And one here from Karen. You've talked about texting while driving, but what about hands-free and Bluetooth phone usage while driving? Does this information provide evidence to support a change in legislation with regards to hands-free mobile phone use whilst driving?
It's an interesting issue. Because of the fact that it's hand-free, you're not engaged while with the phone physical in your hand. So with the texting, you've got the thing physical in your hand. So there's a lot of sensors that have been engaged while you've got the thing physical in your hand. The thing is with the hands-free technology, look, I personally, I rarely speak on the phone in the car because of the fact that I know I have to concentrate. So look, I think that some people are better at being able to deal with this than others, but anything that's going to take some cognitive load, if you like, whilst in the car is going to have an effect. And it's, so just go back to the principle, okay, driving a car, you need to concentrate. So any other extraneous variable that comes in that's taking some cognitive load, you pretty much got to halve it. So I think that should be a litmus test.
Self-regulation.
Self-regulation.
And last one here before we move on, from Chris, is there research on how busy brain syndrome affects family life? Keen to know.
Very good question. I'll allude to the alcohol now. Whenever I train people, I say, yeah, how many of you go home and have a drink, you know, a couple of nights a week? And, you know, maybe one or two hands will go up. Oh, how many of you do it, say, once a week, and then a couple more hands go up? And then I get to the bottom of it. The number of people that are consuming alcohol on a daily basis is extraordinary. And then the next question I ask is, how many Dan Murphys were there in 1999? No one knows. There was 4. How many are there now? In excess of 190. And that's not counting the liquor choice, the beer, wine and spirits, and the Thirsty Camel and those other things that are in other states. It's phenomenal. So who's drinking this stuff? We all are. And why? Because alcohol turns busy brain syndrome off. We're self-medicating. And it's not just us, it's all over the world. I've done work with people in the States, and it's a massive phenomenon over there. And interestingly, a year or so ago, 2 countries actually put their hand up and said, I think we've got a problem here with self-medication with alcohol. And one was Belgium, and the other one was Ireland, which I think is quite funny. But yeah, in terms of family life, we see a lot of alcohol consumption in homes. I had one girl that said, oh, if I can get through cooking dinner before I actually get the wine out of the fridge, then I'm having a good night. So, you know, it does impact our family lives across the board. So, you know, it's most I guess families spend a lot of time being stressed, and you know, look to the weekends. Oh, if I can just get through to the weekend. And unfortunately, that gets impinged upon the kids as well. So yeah, I can give you some strategies around how to to improve that later on.
I think we're about to get them now, so let's move on.
Okay. So all right, how do we overcome busy brain syndrome? So as I alluded to earlier on, busy brain syndrome is going on at the in the animal part of the brain, which is essentially a very primitive part of the brain, and it's linear. It's not complex. It's a simple linear process, and effectively that fight or flight response, which gets locked on from busy brain syndrome, is the autonomic nervous system, which is operated by the sympathetic or the parasympathetic nervous system. It's locked onto the sympathetic side, which is the stress side. So when we're in our normal relaxed state, we are on the green, and so we jump over to the red whenever we need it. And a really good example of explaining how this works and how we can actually learn to control it is with elite sports people. So elite sports people who have psychologists and so forth training them, what they're learning to do is to overpower this system. So we know that Buddhist monks and all those sorts of people, they can completely overpower this system, which is autonomic. Like I said, it's unconscious and out of our supposed conscious control, but it's not. We can control it. So I'll give you an example of Michael Diamond, the shooter, for the Olympic shooter, who has been very, very successful in winning gold medals. And the reason that he was very, very good was because of the fact that he controlled his system. So what he needed to do was to raise up his stress level. So essentially this fight or flight response also is what we call the Yerkes-Dodson curve, which is the performance arousal curve. So I don't know if you've all heard of that, but it's basically you need to have a certain level of arousal in order to be able to perform at your best, which is what sports people do all the time. So, you know, if you're on the starting line of a race, for example, you get the nerves, you feel the butterflies, or you're at the start of an exam, you feel nervous, you get the butterflies in your stomach. That's arousal. That's the stress response. So getting back to Michael Diamond, he needed to learn, as I said, to control this system. So when he lined his weapon up on the target, he had to raise his arousal level up, or the red side here, really, really high to get to be accurate enough on the target. However, when your arousal level raises up that high, there's lots of hormones and neurotransmitters that are released, one of which is dopamine. which controls lots of things, but one of them is muscles. So when there's lots of dopamine floating around, is when, as is there are, is when you raise your arousal level up, your muscles are flickering. So that was problematic for Michael Diamond with his shooting because his finger was moving. So that meant he would have missed. So he would have been off target. So he had to learn very quickly, within 30 seconds, to drop that arousal level right back down again before he pulled the trigger. So it was dead still, which is why he got so good and why he won all those gold medals. So he learned to control this, and we all can. We all used to be able to do it, but we've lost the ability to do it through busy brain syndrome. And the way in which I teach people to overcome busy brain syndrome is to learn to control this system. So, okay, how do we do that? Essentially, we do that through re-engaging our sensory intelligence or our innate intelligence. This is the intelligence that we're born with. So if we look at that diagram, we see the EQ, the IQ, and the SQ. So we all know the IQ is the rational brain, and we're all really good at that. And unfortunately, in our Western world in particular, we give sort of 90% of our value, if you like, to IQ. And EQ only became something that we considered in sort of early to mid-90s with Goldman's wonderful books and so forth. So now for leadership, for example, a leader would not consider developing his or her EQ. SQ, and this is something that's still not acknowledged. And look, it's because of the fact that it's unconscious. And the interesting thing is that lots of us like meditating and yoga and exercise and all this sort of thing. And what we're actually doing with when we're engaging those activities is we're engaging our sensory intelligence. So, as I said, it's innate. And the reason I got the picture of the baby there is because that's the only intelligence we're born with. So when we're born, we are born with all the neurons we're going to have, but nothing's wired, nothing works, which is why babies cry. So the only way in which babies can communicate is via their sensory intelligence. So that's why they cry. And why do they cry? Because they feel hungry, or they feel wet, or they feel a pain. And so they cry as a result. So that's their body speaking to them and them communicating as a result. Another question I always ask people when I train is like, how many of you ever notice your body? How many ever pay attention to it? No one does. The only time we do is when it's in pain. And the other thing I often ask is, how many of you get sick when you go on holidays? So many people do, especially over winter. And the thing is that there would have been signs and symptoms beforehand, but we don't pay attention. And it's why men's health is very problematic. Oh, men don't pay attention. They leave things till the last minute, particularly with serious illnesses, because they're not paying attention. They lost the ability to pay attention. So why is it that our sensory intelligence, if you like, turns off busy brain syndrome? It's the fact that our sensory intelligence controls that red or green. So the stress response is controlled by our sensory intelligence. So we all know that having a good laugh makes us feel good. We know when we're creative, we feel good. How many of you have undertake a creative pursuit such as painting or something, and you find yourself just lost in time? It's like, oh my God, 5 hours have disappeared. I didn't even notice it. And the reason that these things work is because we're flicking off that stress response, which is why alcohol works as well. But I do not recommend using alcohol as a means to turn it off. So the only thing is that, as I used to explain to school principals when I trained them quite a few years ago now, it's like, well, you can't sort of, when Johnny's mother, who's come in to see you with the baseball bat, you can't just say, excuse me, Johnny's mother, I'll just sit here and meditate for a few minutes while, you just wait. So, these sorts of things don't work in the moment, which is problematic. So we need to be able to learn to use them when we need to use them. So which gets me to the point to around breaking habits and behaviour change. So with being able to overcome busy brain syndrome, the first thing we need to do is to increase our capacity to be aware. So we all know with mindfulness and all these other things, and it's around being able to be more aware. And with leadership, for example, today, one of the most important attributes with leaders is their capacity to be aware. And interestingly, as I alluded to before, around leaders that are very, very good, and we all know these people, why are they really good? They've got really, really high developed self-awareness and awareness to be able to pay attention to others. And so with the awareness, as I said, it's so critical, because when you're actually aware, you're in a state, in that relaxed state. So we all have moments of this, and any of you that exercise a lot, and you'll know how good it feels after you've exercised, and you've actually got a capacity to be a little bit aware of yourself. And but unfortunately, being able to notice and pay attention and be aware is really difficult to learn. And it's actually something that you need to practice on a daily basis. So one of our earlier questions around how mindfulness and so forth, how we can actually make this stuff work. It's hard, and I'm the first one to admit that it's hard. So by increasing our ability to pay attention and be aware, that's the first step to breaking down busy brain syndrome. And one of the best things that can help with that, and I'll go back to the train drivers, one of the things that worked so well with the train drivers, because these guys were mostly long-haul drivers, and so they were in the cabin for 6 plus 8 hours a day, and it was so easy for them to drift off. And so one of the things that worked so powerfully with these guys was an image that I use when I train. I haven't got it here, but it was the bucket. And the bucket had this nice big pile of brown stuff coming out with, and the train drivers like that. But basically it was, what's in your bucket? Because when you're actually distracted, you're not actually paying attention to the task at hand, you're not focusing on what you should be focusing on, you're actually distracted by other things. So what happened with those train drivers, and why this was so powerful with them, is they got great big images of this big bucket, and they put it on a big wheelie bin outside the tea rooms at all of the stations. So every time the drivers would walk out, before they got into their cabins with their trains, they would see that image and they'd go, where's my bucket? Oh, it's not here. I'm leaving it at home today, or I've left it in the car, or what have you. It was so powerful because it was such a trigger for them to realise when they were actually going to start to lose focus. And it was that simple little visual, and I actually encouraged them to put it on their phones, not that they allowed them in the cabin, but they'd have them there. They'd put images inside their cabin, and every time they saw that, it was like a jolt to their capacity to pay attention and be aware. Oh, what am I doing? What am I focusing on? If you continue to do that over a period of time of 21 days, which is this process here to break a habit, you will go a long way to actually being able to overcome busy brain syndrome, because essentially busy brain syndrome is an unconscious habit that we've established. So it's the way in which, as I said, to overcome it is simply through mastering behaviour change through this process. And awareness is the tough one, because it's the one that you have to start with, and by default busy brain syndromes erodes your capacity to be aware. So we're getting on with time, so I'll stop there, but happy to take questions.
Excellent, and geez, we've got a few that are coming through. Just a quick one. My background rowing, both at all levels, and coaching. Whenever you go out as a crew and you're flowing and you're moving, the moment the psyche, everyone comes together. It just flows beautifully, and that's some of the best sort of sessions we've had. As a coach, one of the hardest things is people don't like being uncomfortable. So when you critique them and you say you've got to try and change your style, your technique, you've got to do this, our philosophy was you always had to have 7 sessions of uncomfortableness before they make it into a habit. Thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's basically behaviour change 101 in terms of breaking these habits. And if you overlay busy brain syndrome over that, and as I said, it's really, really difficult to break habits. There's some great books written on habits. But essentially, when you're actually repeating behaviours, you do need to keep reinforcing. And so the more that you repeat and reinforce, the more likelihood that you will bust that habit. So that's why any effective behaviour change has measurement capacities and reinforcement. The fact that you were the coach, Jerome, would mean that you're the measurement, and the fact that you're actually reinforcing it and encouraging them to reinforce it themselves, that's where the reinforcement comes in. So those two things are really, really fundamental and critical to successfully achieving behaviour change. But it's basically breaking down a habit, so you have to actually start doing the new thing more than the old thing. And that's tough to start with until you get control over the old thing and you start doing the new thing more.
Great. And we've got a bit of a theme here now and a few questions. Got a good one here from Mal. As a young driver educator, I was curious if there was any advice or practices you could offer learner drivers to combat cognitive distractions when in the car.
I think that in terms of the kids, like I said, if you can somehow capture with the kids, and I did this when I was teaching my own kids to drive, if you can capture that that initial sort of fear and shock around the fact that this is hard. Oh my God, this is so hard. So it is, like as Jerome alluded to earlier, it's really hard to learn this. Try and get them to keep hold of that, because that's what happens when they actually get complacent and become competent, and it all slips into autopilot. They forget. So I found that worked with my kids because and I sort of get into my kids because of the whole expertise in busy brain syndrome, if you like. So my kids get this stuff, but
and
like
your kids?
But I hound them, and so it's almost like you've got to be able to anchor that, because when they become complacent, then it's gone. So you've got to be able to sort of hang on to the past. So and in terms of doing that, I would, if you're actually training young kids, I'd encourage you to actually just keep them focused on remember this, and the fact that yes, they might get competent at driving, but they're not going to get competent at actually being able to pay attention, because that is different every time you get in the vehicle. Every time you get in the vehicle, you're going to have different circumstances and different things that you're going to have to navigate. So again, getting them into that habit of like, look, every drive is a new experience. So I've got to be on the ball.
And here Tanya sort of draws on it even a bit more directly. Do young people have the capacity to control distractions and make behavioural changes in the moment?
No, not until they conquer busy brain syndrome. And certainly young kids are probably at a, well, they're behind the 8 ball more than others, because of the fact that they've grown up with this stuff. So they've grown up with technology. So their brains are actually, whilst on the one hand they have a slightly better capacity to pay attention, we're still animals. That part of the brain's just not going to change. So we're still, and that's for a very good reason. And until we turn into Tin Men or Cybermen, we're still going to be humans. And we have to actually learn to, as I said, develop our sensory intelligence and work from the base of the fact that we're humans. When we're not actually focused and working from the basis of the fact that we're humans, we think that we have greater capabilities than we do. And young kids in particular have that, which is why with that study I alluded to, of course I can text and drive. They just think that it's a given that they can. So like really good point, but again it's getting them back to the fact that no, you can't do this. And I guess the other thing with kids is that there's some good work by Simon Sinek around young kids, and there's a good video that he alludes to with kids, and he's got some really good points in there around the fact that these kids have also not been through the school of hard knocks, and unfortunately unfortunately or fortunately, the school of hard knocks is a really good teacher. So we tend to mollycoddle our kids, and I know I do that too much myself. We try to protect them too much, but we're doing them a massive disservice by doing that.
What about the technology angle, and how as vehicles increasingly add more and more technology to them, the innate ability of the driver to feel, to be in tune with its where they're driving, what they're doing, whether they sort of lose that as well?
Absolutely lose it, and I've got a relatively new car. I don't use any of the technology. When I was training those train drivers, I never forget this one driver said to me, "Oh, do you know how we drive our train?" I said, "No, how do you drive the train?" He said, "Nobody realises that when we drive our train, these things are massive, 12 to 18,000 tonnes. The front has to outrun the back. So we drive our trains through the seat of our pants. We feel it. And I grew up on a farm, and my father taught me to feel. We had an old Land Rover, so you know I had to pay attention. I learnt to drive when I was young on the farm. So he taught me always to be paying attention to the vehicles through what I could feel. But we've lost that. So and so with my kids, I've taught them to feel the car. Pay attention to your car, feel it, listen to the engine. So you know, and we don't get taught that anymore. So we just ignore it. We expect the bling and the other things to actually tell us. Whereas you know we're actually doing ourselves a disservice to learn to develop these innate capacities that we have that we're really good at.
And we'll make this our last question. I do apologise to those we did not unfortunately get a chance to answer, but we have run a little bit over time. We are mindful that a lot of people have other things to do. Would it be fair to say that young people's attention is directed at the wrong stimuli as opposed to being able to focus on what's really important? From Duncan.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's due to the fact that they've grown up with technology, and like I was interviewed by John Fain on the ABC radio 18 months or so ago, and the switchboard went crazy, and most of the callers were parents really worried about their kids, and so a lot of the questions were around what can I do with my kids, and my advice to them was that, like, you know, don't use the technology as a babysitter. You've got to be really rigorous with your rules around technology, and get them out. So the thing is that kids are not learning these fundamental things, such as, you know, going out and interacting with nature and interacting with the ground and trees and these sorts of things. They are so fundamental to our capacity to be a decent, reasonable human being and able to problem solve and all the rest of it. They're just simply not getting those opportunities. So I'd strongly encourage you at all opportunities to sort of get your kids out there and to do things and to explore and to throw, you know, play with sticks and what have you, because they're learning tactile skills, they're learning all sorts of things by doing that.
My daughter loves earthworms, so on that point I'm going to say thank you very much, Lucia, and I do apologise once again to those questions we've missed out, but time has run out, so thank you. Thank you, Melissa.
Great, thanks Jerome and Lucia, and thank you to everyone for your attendance and participation today. We've had such an engaged audience and lots of questions rolling through, so as Jerome said, we'll try and get to all those questions on conclusion of the webinar. We'd love to hear your feedback on this webinar and your thoughts on the webinar topics we can bring to you, so please complete the short survey that will launch on conclusion of this webinar. I'd also like to remind you that the webinar has been recorded, so please refer to this if you'd and get some further questions from that if you would like. Special thank you to Lucia for taking the time to put together and deliver this presentation. I think we can all definitely relate to busy brain syndrome in some degree or another, and it's great that you're bringing awareness to such a, I don't know, prominent, relatable society today, I guess. So Lucia, is there any key message you would like to leave your audience with?
Yes, I think that a really key, easy thing that you can all do is to develop your awareness and to use, you know, things like your mobile phone. If you want to just pick a habit, I'd encourage you all to pick a habit that you want to change. And so, for example, if you don't want to eat a donut when you go and get your coffee at lunch at morning tea, for example, put an image of that donut with the red circle and the cross through it, and have that as your last thing that you look at before you go into the coffee shop. Yeah, chances are you do that every day. You know, within
break a habit.
You'll break the habit. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, good one. Thank you. Once again, thank you everyone for your participation, and we'll hope you join us with future webinars.
Thank you.